test the fuel pressure on the M271 C230 compressor engines. Mercedes is kind enough to include a Schrader valve. Essentially, that valve allows you to test the fuel pressure at the rail. The fuel rail is right between the airbox itself and the engine. You can access the Schrader valve by lifting this cover. You'll also need a fuel pressure gauge. I purchased this from Amazon. It's a OTC brand fuel pressure gauge. It has a pretty nice design. It comes with a few valves that will allow you to attach to different types of Schrader valves. It also has a release mechanism, and this is very useful when you're removing the tool, because what you can do is you can unplug the fuel fuse and then press the button, and it'll release all the fuel that's in the rail. Before we start, we have to make sure there's no fuel pressure going through the rail, and one way you can do this is to deactivate the fuel pump on the car. The fuel pump itself is the circuit has a relay, and for me, I've already taken the fuse out. But if you go to the trunk of your car, and on the left side there's this panel here where the first aid kit is. Just turn this and pop this open. This is your first aid kit. Right down here is the rear SAM, or the rear fuse box, and there's a cover here that protects the fuses. This right here is a clip that allows you to easily remove fuses. You won't need that today. We'll just put that back. So just take out the styrofoam cover. It just clicks on by friction, and if you look, count from the top, it might be very hard to see, but on the side it's numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, and number 4 fuse is the fuse for the fuel pump. Once you remove the fuse, what you want to do is crank the engine. It will run for a split second, and any remaining fuel will be purged from the system. And because the pump is not providing fuel pressure to the rail, it will draw out the remaining pressure in the rail. So I'm just going to start the car now. It'll start and then it'll die. And as you can see, the car no longer starts, and that should have gotten rid of most, if not all, fuel from the system. Lift up the valve cover, and that just allows you to access the Schrader valve. The Schrader valve is on the left side, or the driver's side, and it's this cap right here. So you want to just twist that off. No matter how hard you try to purge the system of any fuel, you'll notice that when you try to turn the fuel pressure tester onto the valve, it'll still spray fuel. Get some shop towels and put it around the valve itself, like a donut around the valve, and that way it catches some of the fuel that spills. You also don't want fuel around a hot engine in case of a fire, so it might be wise to also keep a fire extinguisher close by. Also have a glass jar here, and what I'll do with this is I'll put this end of the purge line into there so that I have a place to purge the fuel. Obviously you need your pump to be working again, so reinstall the fuse, turn it once, turn it to the on position, and this will prime the fuel pump, and then go check the fuel pressure on the gauge. As you can see, it's about 50, 52, 53 psi's. Normal pressure on this vehicle, from what I've read on Haynes manual, is I think 55 to 59 psi's. Engine isn't on yet, but right now it's showing around 53 psi's. To see if you have any leaks, whether at the injector or elsewhere, I'll turn the key back to the off position and see whether the fuel pressure drops and how much it drops in 1 minute. In 1 minute, it shouldn't drop at all. Turn off the key. 2.5 minutes, I see no change in the fuel pressure. So if you have this, then you know there's no major leaks in your system, whether at the fuel pump or at the injectors themselves. So for the next test, I actually need to have the car on, and I'll actually need to be in the driver's seat to rev the engine a bit. And I essentially want to see whether the fuel pressure changes with constant RPM, whether it drops or not. Your fuel injectors require a certain amount of pressure to work properly. And if you see any drops when you increase the RPM constantly. So let's just say you rev it up to 1500, 2000 RPM. You should see a fairly consistent fuel pressure from the 55 to 59 range. If you see a drop, that might indicate you either have a clogged fuel filter or a malfunctioning fuel pump. You don't want to just unscrew the valve. A lot of fuel will spray out. What you want to do now is return to the rear and pull that number 4 fuse for the fuel pump. And you can either run the engine or you can purge the fuel line, the entire fuel line of fuel by pressing the purge valve and releasing the gasoline into a container. And that way you can safely remove the Schrader valve with the Schrader connector without risking fuel spraying around the engine.